Welcome to This Jungian Life. Three good friends and Jungian analysts, Lisa Marciano, Deborah Stewart, and Joseph Lee, invite you to join them for an intimate and honest conversation that brings a psychological perspective to important issues of the day.
I'm Lisa Marciano, and I'm a Jungian analyst in Philadelphia.
I'm Joseph Lee, and I'm a Jungian analyst in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
I'm Deborah Stewart, a Jungian analyst on Cape Cod.
Jung was introduced to alchemy in the 1920s after he was running into symbolic imagery in his patients' dreams, like mandalas and transformative images and mystical unions that bore a very strange and uncanny similarity to the illustrations in a Renaissance alchemical text. And the turning point came when his friend Richard Wilhelm, who was a German sinologist and translator of the I Ching, gave him a copy of the 16th century Rosarium Philosophorum. And what he focused on were these wood block prints that provided a sequence of images of transformation. And Jung came to realize that the alchemists, who believed that they were transforming matter, were actually projecting their own inner psychological processes onto their work, which was unconsciously mapping an inner transformative process. So when Jung discovered alchemy, he saw that it was a system that was much older than modern psychology that mirrored the stages of individuation. And these stages are often summarized as the nigredo, albedo, citrinatus, and rubedo, with various other transformative descriptions in between. And this illuminated the archetypal nature of the unconscious, and this became central to his later theories of the self, archetypes, and the integration of opposites. And this reinforced his connection of psychology with myth, mysticism, and this deep symbolic language of the soul. And since there are many stages in alchemy, we've decided to do a series of episodes breaking each one down, explaining it, and also providing some very practical examples of it. Today, we're going to talk about Calcinatio.
Aha, the fire.
The fire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's often considered to be the first operation in alchemy, although not always. Nothing is hard and fast in alchemy.
What happens with these various operations, as they're called, one of which is the fire, calcinatio, is it's an image or a metaphor for what happens in the psyche, what gets ignited, what gets burned away, what eventually turns to ash. And often fire is equated with desire, with libido, with passion, and of course, with all kinds of things that have to do with fire and instinct. And that is the matter that is in each of us, the prima materia that is to be transformed by these various operations, one of the first of which is calcinatio. So the matter gets tortured. We have to experience the frustration and all that goes with these kinds of alchemical processes as metaphors for what we encounter in our lives.
Yes, and of course, Deb, just building on that, the idea of alchemy in essence was to find the philosopher's stone, which was a substance that could turn lead into gold, among other things. So, and that whole idea of lead into gold is a profound metaphor for kind of a psycho-spiritual transformation, to take something that's base and doesn't have much value, and the idea that you could turn it into the thing that is of everlasting value, right? Because gold is incorruptible. That's quite a metaphor. And one of the things that so excited Jung about alchemy, and he was very excited about alchemy, was these images, these metaphors show up in this completely different place in the culture. The alchemists, most of them, Jung believed, had no idea that that's what they were doing. Most of them really thought they were working to change lead into gold. Some, Jung suspected, understood that they were engaged in a kind of psycho-spiritual endeavor. But it sort of makes that point, right? That without even realizing it, we're always working at these problems. We're always striving toward individuation, even when we think we're doing something else.
And these are operations that are metaphors for experiences. How do we understand our experiences of everything, in this case, that has to do with fire, with power, with instinct, with heat? How do we experience Calcinatio? And all of these operations are processes and lived opportunities, if we can see them that way, for our own individuation process of transforming our own unconscious or base instinctual nature into consciousness and wholeness.
So Calcinatio gets its name from limestone, from the heating of limestone. And the idea of calcination is to heat something up, heat up a solid until all the water's gone and just a fine, dry, often white powder remains. And doing this to limestone, turning limestone into what's called quicklime, is kind of the principal image, I think, in this operation of calcinatio.
And what is it that is being calcined? In essence, it's affect, intense affect of how do we experience feeling without being identified with it? What do we do with intense affect? And that is what can get burned away. Especially, our sense of entitlement or rightness, desire, what we really crave. And the fire can be a way of refining us, of redeeming something and turning it to the white ash of awareness.
Hello. Podcast listeners are invited to join me for a Vital Spark book club event on Monday, August 4th at 6 p.m. ET. All you have to do is read some or all of my book, The Vital Spark, Reclaim Your Outlaw Energies and Find Your Feminine Fire, and then join me with a glass of something cold to discuss it on Zoom. This will be a relaxed, informal event with plenty of time to ask me all of your questions. Find the link in the show notes to buy The Vital Spark and to register for the book club event. I hope to see some of you there.
I found myself just wanting to pick up a thread, Lisa, that you had put down, and then we can jump back to that subjective. How important it is, this idea of transformation. Because so much of what we are vulnerable to do is rejecting and cutting away. And this was Freud's great discovery, is that people were, or his patients were in this intractable tension. He was focused mostly on sexual repression. And they were in great conflict about their sexuality, but rather than seek to transform the conflict, they were cutting it off and pushing it into the unconscious and becoming deeply symptomatic. Often the Christian theological perspective was about rejecting, cutting away, suppressing, that in the general attitude of the world at that time, in the 1920s, for instance, and 30s and 40s, this idea that human beings could transform was actually really quite new. And so Jung was really offering a very different perspective where who we are at any given moment, none of it is disposed of, but all of it could be held and worked in a particular way that it could exhibit more and more refined potentials. So the idea of transformation, which I think we take for granted now in many psychological systems and even in modern parlance, that was a quite new idea for Jung. So for him to find this ancient sequence, which was highly symbolic, that seemed to match the images he was seeing in people's dreams, really gave him this hope that change on an ever-heightening arc was possible and that the Rosarium woodcuts were a map. Now, coming back to what Deb had said about this first stage of fire, or submitting the substance to fire, has much to do with intensity of feeling or affect. And one of the ways that this is seen in all of our lives, and sometimes often in therapy, is through frustration. That whenever we're moving in a direction psychologically or physically, road rage is a great example of this. You're driving along, you want to get to work, the traffic stops you dead in your tracks, and you feel this upwelling of heat and maybe rage, and maybe you're even howling, hopefully, in the container of your car, which is like an alchemical vase, and you're fussing and punching the windows. By the way, there are these alchemical images of dragons captured in glass vessels, roaring and belching fire, which is really what you look like when you're road raging, by the way. You've become a little dragon. And interestingly enough, if you don't jump out of the car and start menacing the other people that are in the traffic jam, but you actually sit in your car and you just let yourself catch on fire, there's a kind of arc that happens. And often people move from belching fire in the vase to something else, which might be resignation. Or suddenly you find yourself thinking of a solution like, next time, I'm not going to take the Long Island Expressway, I'm going to take the train. Because this is a bad choice. It's not working for me. So the frustration can lead to innovation. It can lead to self-examination. God forbid your spouse is in the passenger seat, plastered against the door, frightened of the dragon you have become. And then we turn and realize the effect we're having on our passenger. And then we have this determination to do something about all this fire that comes up when we are frustrated. That's an example maybe we can all relate to. But the truth is, life is a series of frustrations in as much as a directional energy rises up inside of us, and very often the way forward to the satisfaction of your interests is fraught with obstacles of one kind or another.
Yeah.
And the thing about calcinatio is, Deb, you said that the feelings are the thing that needs to be calcined, and that's true. But it's also the intense feelings that provide the heat, that provide the fire. So there's a way that they kind of consume themselves. These feelings, they transform themselves in a manner that you were just describing, Joseph.
Yeah. And if it can be contained in the alchemical vase of the car, then something else has happened. The ego has been worked on. Of I need to get to work. I can't stand this ridiculous traffic jam. All that material that we're all familiar with, that kind of thing. But that's my ego. I want it to be different. I want a good, smooth ride. I just want to get there. What do we do when the fire comes up? And we have to deal with that feeling. And if we can get to resignation or acceptance or just simply calm down, it is a real victory. We have grown. And I know, parents do this all the time with children, of the child that is so upset and so angry because of all the things that kids experience, frustration of, I can't tie my shoe. It won't tie. I can't make it happen.
I lived that moment, by the way.
I know you did. I was thinking of you because you told that story once on the podcast. But that somebody is reassuring or calming or containing to say, yes, you can. Just sit down for a sec. Just breathe for a minute. You know how to do it. That is a way of containing and transforming the affect of frustration into something else, depending on the age and stage and situation.
So what's transformed in the end is an attitude.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in the story that you were alluding to, I remember it being maybe 3 or 2 years old. I'm standing at the top of the stairs barefoot, and I'm like barking for my mother. Like literally, I'm like, pull out my shoes,
Intense affect.
Intense affect. And so my mother comes and she steps down one step and is, kind of has my shoes in her hands. And then I remember this so vivid, she pauses, she looks at me and she kind of squints her eyes a little bit and she says, you can put them on yourself. And I had a tirade, howling and screaming. And then she handled this really well. She just kind of sat there and then she walked away. And then I calmed down and put the shoes on. Now, the real transformation was the attitude from I can't put my shoes on to I can put my shoes on. So I can't remember my theory of personality at 2. I'm sure it was particularly sophisticated, I suppose.
I'm sure it was.
I'm sure it was. But I actually calmed down. I kind of knew I could put them on. I did put them on. And also, I never asked anyone to ever tie my shoes again. So it really was a permanent change of attitude.
Yeah.
And my mother in that moment was the vase. I became the little dragon.
Mm-hmm.
She appropriately just, and somewhat benevolently, just held the moment. And then she stepped away and my attitude shifted, which of course was greatly beneficial to me because then I could put my shoes on and go outside without like a whole rigmarole.
Right.
So as you were saying, Deb, kids go through these all the time. Parents provide the container instinctively. But the storminess, this is where Jung came in. The storm in that moment, which my mother didn't interfere with. She didn't try to calm me. She didn't punish me. She just watched while I stormed, and in the storm, discovered I didn't need her to put my shoes on. Fast forward, we're in the car, storm, 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 and then any number of new attitudes might emerge, like, I'm going to take a different route, or I have got to get on the road an hour earlier, or I'm being an asshole and I need to calm down, which I've told myself sometimes. But the goal of the frustration is to realize that whatever attitude I'm using in that moment it's kind of hurting me. It's not working very well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So just wanting to kind of link this back to alchemy, I thought I would read, because the thing about alchemical texts, if anyone has ever tried to read one, is they're very, very difficult to understand. And Jung, by the way, had a very impressive library, apparently, of alchemical texts from the Middle Ages. So let's just start with an image of Calcinatio, as would be described. So this is like an alchemical cookbook. All right. So it's telling you what to do. And it's from the 12 Keys of Basil Valentine. And here's the recipe. Take a fierce gray wolf, which is found in the valleys and mountains of the world, where he roams almost savage with hunger. Cast to him the body of the king, and when he has devoured it, burn him entirely to ashes in a great fire. By this process, the king will be liberated, and when it has been performed thrice, the lion has overcome the wolf and will find nothing more to devour in him. Thus, our body has been rendered fit for the first stage of our work. So this is the preparation for the work. Now, what the heck does that mean? So this is the kind of language, and there's an accompanying illustration, by the way, of a fire and a wolf eating someone. So, and there's incredible, like these beautiful woodcuts of these bizarre images. But what on earth is that about? So, if you think about this passage chemically, and I'm relying here on Edward Edinger in his book, The Anatomy of the Psyche. So the wolf is assumed to be antimony, which was sometimes called the wolf of metals. And it was used to purify molten gold because I guess the impurities would kind of like be drawn out or would stick to the antimony in a chemical process that I cannot explain to you. And so the antimony was sometimes called the balneum regis, the bath of the king. So from a strictly chemical reading of the text, this is instruction on how to purify gold, at least as I understand it. But then what does it mean psychologically?
Well, one of the reasons that the alchemists phrased things in such a totally incomprehensible way to our rational mind is that they were subversives, and they were not really part of and were challenging a lot of the tenets of Christianity. So they developed code that only other initiates, only other alchemists could understand. So they were kind of covering their tracks in that way. And the wolf represented just unbounded, raw, instinctual voraciousness, of the devouring attitude of the wolf. And the king often represents sort of the dominant, ego-ruling attitude. And so here is instinct devouring the ruling attitude.
And so what that means in it, let's say an analytic process, is that it's not uncommon for somebody who is very cut off from their instincts to have to rediscover them. And when they are reclaimed and re-experienced, they can be extremely intense. They can temporarily dominate the personality. But because the instinctive layer of the psyche is the original layer, I mean, the first breath you take, or in utero for that matter, you are ruled by these ancient instincts. So if we have fallen far away from our natural personality, sometimes the transformative process involves having our instincts roar upward, gobble us up for a little while, and we're returned to kind of squalling, instinctive creatures, which gives us an enormous amount of energy. And then we have the much longer task of reweaving a personality that includes more of our instinctive clarity. So the wolf sometimes will eat the king in an alchemical metaphor. Sometimes the wolf will eat the sun, which is another metaphor for consciousness, for being wide awake as we are in the daytime.
Yeah, I'm really, I'm back on how important it is of that first resurgence of some kind of affect that has had to be shut down, closeted away. And what a surprise it can be when it comes roaring out with such heat and such voraciousness. And people will say, I don't know, I wasn't myself. I don't know what came over me. Your example of road rage is a great example of that. All of a sudden you're stuck in traffic and this huge surge of feeling comes up out of nowhere, pounding the steering wheel. I personally can remember a time when, of course, I was much, much younger, but I was an adult and I was late to pick up my children and stuck in traffic. And I remember screaming and yelling and hitting the steering wheel. And then afterwards going, what was I doing? You know, yes, it was frustrating and I didn't want to be late, but that surge of wolf-like, instinctual, wild, untamed feeling, I think is an experience that most everybody has had.
We hope so. Well, because it is central. And what we see in cultures that disallow a reasonable palette of emotional expression is that people become unwell. And what Freud was coming across is that people would become unwell to the degree that their bodies would not function correctly because of the incredible stress of this repressed and cut off instinctive layer. Freud was the first psychologist of instinct. Adler was the first ego psychologist that was dealing with, basically cognitive psychology is what he created. And Jung was the first psychologist of the transcendent. And of course, they cross-pollinated each other all the time.
Yeah. And I want to go back to this idea about frustration, because I think we've sort of been saying this again and again, but it's really important. It's that you have the desirousness, kind of the wolf. And then for whatever reason, you're frustrated, you're in traffic, or you haven't ever tied your shoes before. And it's the frustration that is the change element. It's the frustration that in the alchemical metaphor is the transforming fire. Fire as a metaphor is a very profound one. Jung spent a lot of time in Volume 5 talking about fire symbolism. And part fire symbolism comes up all over the place in religious symbols and in myths and fairy tales, of course. We could just come up with a dozen off the top of our heads, I'm sure, including, kind of Prometheus stealing fire. But fire's interesting because when you burn something, it goes through a complete chemical transformation. If you add water to salt, that is, that's a mixture, and there's a chemical term for that I cannot remember from 11th grade chemistry. Solution, is that it? Anyway.
I think you're right. Yes, solution, solutio.
But you can separate them, right? You can evaporate the water, and what is left is salt. They haven't been fundamentally changed. It's a chemical reaction that will change a substance. And fire is an example of that. If you burn something, it ain't never going back to the way it was before. So it's psychologically a very profound image. And it goes along with this idea of transformation and change. It goes along with this idea of, kind of burning desire. It is used in sacrifices. You make something sacred by sacrificing it, often by burning it. And then the smoke goes up to the realm of the gods. So the fire of frustrated desire is a powerful psychological change agent.
In service to that, I want to circle back to the idea of the burning of limestone, particularly. So the first alchemists, we think, were really the progenitors to chemistry. These were people that just had a natural fascination with matter and the natural world. And as Deb was saying, the later alchemists developed a philosophical alchemy. So there were the philosophical alchemists, and then there were the concrete alchemists. But the first ones or the physical experimenters. And also because there was not a scientific language of chemistry. It simply didn't exist, which meant that the alchemists needed to either borrow common terms from their culture or create a kind of poetic language to try to infer or capture what it was that they were observing. So if we look at Calcinatio, and the reason this is important that it's relative to limestone and lime is that this is something that humans discovered thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, and it became an important tool for a civilization. So when you grind and burn limestone, what happens is it drives off the carbon dioxide, and then it goes from calcium carbonate to calcium oxide, which is a kind of powder or quicklime. Now, this quicklime becomes a very important substance that then is used in all of these different ways, which I think lends something to the metaphor that lime is mixed in with sand or powdered sand and water. And then as the water is added, it reabsorbs the carbon dioxide, and that's what you use to coat the inside of your house. It's called drywall. It's called plaster. Mixed with very coarse sand, it becomes mortar. And the fascinating thing about cement, for instance, which the Romans used to great effect, is that the reintegration of the carbon dioxide and the changes in the cement, it continues to harden for thousands of years. It actually remains active. And this is one of the reasons that there are still Roman roads that are still used in certain parts of Europe, because this remarkable capacity to take what was reduced to ash and then apply it, which is so fascinating. So it becomes mortar or plaster or cement. You put it onto acidic soil and it raises the pH level, which also releases nutrients and promotes microbial activity, which plants need to be able to access what's in the soil. Incredible metaphor. It also has a disinfecting property. Quicklime is sometimes added into your water treatment plants because it will neutralize sewage and purifies drinking water, which goes to this idea of what do we do with the negredo, with the shadow? You can mix it with quicklime. And it also is added into molten metals to remove impurities. So iron, for instance, would be ground up and quicklime would be added, and it would remove phosphorus and sulfur and silica, and then it would leave slag. And that was incredibly important because without that, then iron wouldn't be hard enough. And the Iron Age we talk about in history wouldn't be possible if somebody hadn't figured out, if you burn limestone, this crazy ash is there. And then somebody thought, well, I don't know, let's start adding that ash to a bunch of different things and see what happens. It's added to copper. It's added to lead. Again, over and again, it removes sulfur. And sulfur is also associated with calcinatio often, because the calcinatio process involves the removal of sulfur. And sulfur burns very, very, very hot. It also preserves food. In certain cultures, lime was essential. You would starve if you couldn't preserve food with lime. So lime has all of these really interesting properties, which was possibly known by the philosophical alchemists who could think metaphorically, and as Deb was saying, created a kind of psychological and religious understanding of the soul which, as you were saying, was heretical. So amongst their own initiates, they developed a secret language, which Jung tried very hard to penetrate.
That's a wonderful example of how much truth there was for the old alchemists and the fascination that these physical operations had. Of imagine that you could do this and you add it to this, or you grind it up, or it turns into that. It turns into plaster, it turns into concrete, it fertilizes soil, it does all these things. And without the sort of science and equations that I associate with chemistry, it must have had a really incredible, numinous quality to it of look what matter transformed can do.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as you were saying, of the physical operations of alchemists also became a hugely intricate, incredible symbolic language. Images in alchemy are mysterious and weird. Some of them are astonishingly detailed, magnificent paintings with chariots and dragons and flowers and decorations, and it goes on and on. Take one look at this and you can spend, as we have, an entire afternoon at a seminar on one image because there is so much symbolism in it. But I want to take us to all the different kinds of fire or fire symbols and uses of that as a symbol that there are. We've got the wolf as one of them, but I'm thinking about all kinds of religious imagery. Lisa, you've mentioned the sacrificial fire. There is divine wrath. Zeus famously, could hurl a thunderbolt at somebody. There's fire as punishment. One of the early transgressors in Greek myth was named Ixion, who had made the big mistake. He tried to seduce Hera, Zeus's wife. Zeus strapped him to a wheel of fire where he circles forever, ever after. Of course, there's hellfire, we all know about that. And we have all kinds of phrases around fire, like baptism by fire. So I'm just curious about opening up all these images that we take for granted, I think, sometimes, but how important this operation, metaphorically speaking, of Calcinatio is. We know it.
One of the big themes, I think, about this chemical operation, both chemically and also symbolically, is purification, right? Fire is a purifier. There's the idea of the refiner's fire. Is that a metallurgical concept? I think it might be. But it's where you drive off the impurities and you get down to the basics. So purification is a key theme in this. And Edinger says something in this chapter that really, really struck me, and I think it's kind of central, is that when we first have an upwelling of a kind of instinctual desire, it's contaminated. And the first time it appears, it will be kind of conflated with like an ego power drive, for example. But if we assume that desire is something of value, rather than just repressing it and saying, well, I shouldn't want that, if we let alchemy into our life and we apply a calcinatio, which maybe comes from the frustration of that desire, then we can allow it to become purified so that it then manifests in its higher form, which would be an expression of the self. So to me, that is that is a huge insight, because I do find that many people in treatment come in and feel shy about what they want. They feel maybe a little bit ashamed about wanting something. And it is often the case, again, that when that first impulse arises, it is a little awkward. It does feel like it's connected, for example, with a power drive. But if you can stay with it and work with it, then it transforms. So I want to see if I can come up with an example. If I have someone come in, let's say, and they have an aspiration to, I don't know, become a Jungian analyst, but they feel very shy about that. They feel shy admitting it to me. They don't have a background in mental health. It sort of feels like this kind of wild thing to say. They're worried I'm going to laugh at them. But maybe they have the courage to say, well, part of why I'm here is I think I want to do this. And yes, initially it has a kind of inflation to it, right? Like, you think you can do this, and yet you've never been tested in any way, and you maybe have a kind of grandiose vision about how this is going to go, or how easy it's going to be, or whatever. But if you sit with it, which means sometimes, by the way, tolerating the frustration when you don't get into training the first time, or it takes much longer than you thought, or it's more expensive, it becomes something different. It becomes purified of those ego power drives, of that inflation. It becomes something you can really rely on. This also makes the point, Deb, you were talking about kinds of fire. There is a kind of terrestrial fire that burns us up, that might be, sexual desire or that kind of thing. But then there's also the fire of the Holy Spirit, or ethereal fire. And so can we allow one to transform into the other? And there's just a really amazing quote from Jung. When you indulge in desirousness, whether your desire turns toward heaven or hell, you give the animus or anima an object. Then it comes out into the world instead of staying inside in its place. But if you can say, yes, I desire it, and I shall try to get it, but I do not have to get it. If I decide to renounce it, I can renounce it. Then there is no chance for the animus or anima. Otherwise, you are governed by your desires. You are possessed. But if you have put your animus or anima into a bottle, you are free of possession, even though you may be having a bad time inside. Because when your devil has a bad time, you have a bad time. Of course, he will rumble around in your entrails, but after a while, you will see that it was right to bottle him up. You will slowly become quiet and change. Then you will discern that there is a stone growing in the bottle. Insofar as self-control or non-indulgence has become a habit, it is a stone. And when that habit becomes a fait accompli, the stone will be a diamond.
So I'll add to what you just said from another commentary, although I'm not going to quote it, I'll have to paraphrase it. And where Jung gives us yet a little additional way to imagine that exact same process. That in, I think it's the 9th Rosarium image, where the king and the queen, their bodies have begun to merge. They're in the bottom of the fountain. In the alchemical vessel, the soul is hovering above, ready to reanimate the substance. In front of this bed or sarcophagus, there is one black bird that's popping its head out of the soil. There's another black bird standing on the ground, looking down at the bird whose head is popping up. And there's a commentary that Jung offers about that. And he says that if we take our desires, as you were saying, Lisa, and we contain them, containing them is not the same as repressing them or attacking them or maligning them. What it means is that we allow ourselves to have a full experience of the desire and we elect not to act upon it externally, but we allow it to generate the fantasies that it normally does. As we watch the fantasies for a while and frustrate their outer expression, the fantasies begin to transform and depersonalize. And what he says is very interesting, is we begin to feel that the desire has its own independent life, that the desire is a separate, autonomous image inside of us, and once it is purified of our personal associations, it begins to reveal its own fantasy. So I want to rest into that your desires actually have their own independent psychological processes and their own fantasies, regardless of your preferences. And when the desire is united with its fantasy, not yours, it creates an Ouroboros. It creates a circle where the flighted bird takes the unflighted bird, holds the tail of the flighted bird, and the flighted bird reaches down and holds the tail of the unflighted bird. And then the desire and its own fantasy begin to circulate, generating vitality in the psyche that could then be applied to any number of different things. So, one practical way that we do this, and Deb, I'll turn this over to you, as you've said this many times, is a client comes in and begins to complain, and the thing that they're complaining about is never the thing.
It's such a mantra for me. And I think I got the phrase from Jim Hollis, who is a Jungian analyst and one of our teachers and a noted author, and I can recommend his books to everybody. But what he said very early in training, he said, what it's about is not what it's about. And what you see is compensation for what you don't see. And I was totally gobstruck by that. And so there it is. The thing is my terrible boss, the city that I live in that I just hate. The list goes on and on. And yes, that is what we call the presenting problem. That's very real. You know, your boss is difficult. You would rather live in the country than in the city, et cetera, et cetera. But what else is it about? And then how do we take that and hold it within? And we talk about it, we walk around it, we kind of kick the tires. What is it in you that is being lit up in the calcining fire about your boss? Or about any one of a number of life issues, because that's the part we can work with. Oh, we're not going to change your boss. What does it stand for? What would it mean to you to leave the city and live in the country? We're dealing in the symbolic realm, and that part that you were talking about, Joseph, where the it has its own life. Mm-hmm. The unconscious has independence. It has its own direction. It has its own energy. So when it appears in the symbol of one's boss or a preferred location to live in, we need to really get curious and be like the alchemists with a system where we can phrase things and look at things symbolically. Like, what if this is my inner wolf? What's it trying? What does it want? What's it trying to tell me?
So that's that same principle right in the consulting room and right in your conversation with friends, because
Yeah.
when somebody comes in and says, I hate my boss, and we listen to it for 5, 10, 30 sessions, at some point we say, wait a minute, let's look at you. And the first thing you'll see is the client gets really frustrated, doesn't like it. Like they want to bitch about their boss. They want to lift the lid off the pot and let the steam out. And as soon as we put the lid on and say, whoop, up, 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 yes, it's about your boss, but let's look at you. You can almost immediately see that, building up inside of them.
I still have, that comes up in me all the time, that something happens and it's out there. And I would like somebody to please let me let off some steam, vent to a certain extent about this or that particular frustration that was caused by someone or something in the external world. It's not in me. I know that. Oh, rats. Is it actually, that yes, the event occurred, but the reaction that I had, unfortunately, belongs to me.
Ultimately, alchemy, whether we're talking about the prototype of modern chemistry or its psychological understanding, is about change and it's about transformation. And it incorporates into it the idea of telos, because you're always trying to turn that lead into gold. There's a place that you're going. And every alchemical operation contains this idea of change. The substance that we're working on, which of course, as we know, is really the psyche, is changed in each of these operations.
That's really wonderful and worth repeating. This is about transformation. It's not about behaving better or seeing it differently. And the Calcinatio image is perfect for that. Because as you said before, Lisa, once something is burned, it's never going back. And we see this developmentally, and we see this, in kids all the time. Once that child knows how to ride a two-wheel bike, you know how to ride a bike for the rest of your life, even if you haven't ridden one for 20 years. That these are things where there's change that stays, change that lasts, change in our substance. You knew how to tie shoes, Joseph. So there's something to be gained here. It's not just tough it out, or as they say, suck it up and just deal with it. We're gaining something from each of these operations, like the one we're talking about today.
So I'm going to paraphrase something that I think is so just really great bare bones. And bones are associated with Calcinatio too, because let's say in the funeral pyres, bones are what's left. When I took my father's ashes back from the crematorium, which I'd never done before, I peeked in the box. It's full of ground up bones. It's the calcination process. Jung says something, again, I'm going to not quote it, but paraphrase it, that in the Calcinatio, all superfluidities are consumed in the fire and the basic facts emerge. And boy, that is something that happens in analysis and also a very self-confrontive journaling process, is that we spend a lot of time kind of throwing confetti in the air and talking about it, which disperses the change process. It makes it much less competent. But being able to find out the facts inside of us and the facts outside of us, and I think, Deb, you may have used this phrase, which I've taken on, facts are friendly, which I think is a Gestalty phrase, and that the end result is the observing ego, which is that experience some of us have in dreams as third-person perspective. I am watching myself go about this little theater of a dream, and I'm somewhere else, quietly just watching. So there are no longer the earlier ego make-believes, but a string of hard facts. And that is the ash of the prima materia that is burned off with all of the irrelevant, defensive storytelling that we wrap the facts in, which disguises the issue, going to what you were saying, Deb. And we see this particularly, the difference between free association and disciplined associations. And Jung felt very strongly about it, that when people would just lay on the couch and say whatever came to mind, it was such a dispersing process. But when we're looking at the dream, let's say, and we're doing tight associations and we're staying with the image and the things that are tightly connected to the image, that we then begin to surmise some of the facts underneath the image, which actually has a healing property to it. And again, what we see in analysis as analysts is when we start to take hold of the session and we try to keep the client from going off into the stratosphere, and we keep bringing them back to this, to this, to this, you'll see the frustration being built, and it'll look like they're frustrated with you. But really, it is that you're holding them closer to the issue, and their psyche is generating heat, which is necessary to reveal the thing that is hidden. And then I want to tell you a funny story. So one of my old dear friends that used to be a roommate, she wound up with breast cancer that was successfully treated, and as part of winding up with this terrible problem, she went into therapy, not analysis. And the therapist was this really salty, tough battle axe of a social worker. And my friend and I were both struggling actors, so we're all wonderfully theatrical and histrionic. So she told me this, she says she loved this therapist, so she would start to tell a story, and then it would get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the therapist would lean in and go, actress, come on, wake up, what are you talking about? So this finger snapping, wake the hell up, honey, and stop performing the drama of the moment and get to the meat of the substance. And however she was able to do that with my friend, she actually kind of delighted in it. And it was the thing she needed. And that's a kind of salty, Calcinatio-inducing thing.
I want to pick up on something that you've said about developing and observing ego, and that this sort of dispersing or throwing confetti in the air, that we go on, and we take ourselves further and further away from ourselves. So it's, what is it about? We want to find the what is it really about place, and be able to look at it. So I am feeling, I always pick the example of the boss, all those poor supervisors out there, that this is what happened, and I went in, and then I did this, and he did that. And then when I said this, he did that, or she did that. Of what is it really about, but how also can I look at it more objectively? Of like, to let the dross of my subjectivity, my involvement, my hurt, my justifying it, my outrage, let that burn away and kind of go, that was weird. I'm really interested in this. I mean, just all I did was I said this or that, or then you can, as we do in our consulting rooms, analyze it. Once we have burned away the intense feelings of our own frustration or anger or disappointment or, all of those kinds of things, then we can see it. We have something to work with. We have the ash that gets mixed in with all those things you talked about earlier, and now it's useful.
Yes, it becomes a mortar for the new personality at some point. So the calcination is the ego's mortification. Mortar, right? The ego's mortification. So a life crisis creates heat in the personality, a shattering loss, discovering one's shadow, intense shame, the collapse of a worldview that was cherished. And they burn away the ego's inflated pride, exposing the prima materia of the real self. And often analysands come in this negredo depression where their former values have been turned into ash. And then that's the precondition for the new attitude. And the goal, and this is very different from modern therapy, very different. The goal is not to rescue the ego from the fire too soon, but to let the process complete. This is a phrase from von Franz, sitting in hell and roasting, there is what brings forth the philosopher's stone. So cautioning us, even in supervision, we got this caution. As analysts, don't offer false comfort that would pull somebody out of their transformative pain prematurely, because individuation is forged in the fires of honest suffering and confrontation with the unconscious. Honest suffering.
It's beautifully put. On that, I want to bring in a dream, and this is a dream that someone submitted a while ago. We're also going to do our usual dream at the end, but we went through our dreams and found a couple that relate to fire, just to kind of show how this works in the psyche. And I think, Joseph, what you said before about sort of confronting the what is, and then what you said about honest suffering. And just kind of the collapse of something, and then what do we do with that? And the stream, it's very moving. So I'm just going to read it. So this is a woman who is a therapist, and she's 40 years old, and she called her dream "Escape from Destruction." She said, "I dreamed I was observing myself living in some kind of city that was potentially going to be under siege. These were not peaceful times. I was getting married to a soldier, having an actual wedding. Not sure I was in love with him. Then a friend of mine was singing in an open-air cafe. She was very good. I had a feeling a huge attack by the United States government was coming. Then I saw military planes and a fleet of naval ships approaching to lay waste to the city. An orca had gotten caught in some kind of rope attached to one of the boats and was being dragged. I felt sorrow for it. I urged my friend, the singer, who was now holding a small dog in her arms, to come to the subway with me and leave the city via train. She declined. I went down into the subway and got onto the train. As it sped away, I saw a fireball enter the station. I knew the people in the city, including my friend, had been incinerated from the bombing." And for context, she says, I'm going through a separation and divorce. The reason for the divorce was disagreement about having a child, and so the dream of having a family of my own has been lost as well. I'm trying to reconfigure my life. So here is a real trial by fire, a real calcinatio, and very honest suffering. And we're at that moment, it's so telling to look at dreams and see what happens at the end with the resolution or not. There's no resolution here. There's just kind of catastrophe. That's what we're left with. We don't know what happens next, because that's where she is in her life. She is in this moment of honest suffering and self-confrontation that can become the crucible for transformation.
100%. And the dream maker offers these achingly poignant images with which the dreamer can then access the deep feeling that she may not be able to feel the great compassionate ache for herself. So when she sees the orca being dragged around by the boat, helpless and flailing and hurting, that it conjures a feeling that's already in her, but it conjures it in front of her, conjures it into her own waking mind by remembering the dream. So the dream offers a kind of language of feeling, which is something you've said many times, Deborah, that we can analyze dreams as images of feeling states that we couldn't access otherwise, and that our best friends or even our analysts couldn't provide the metaphor. Like I couldn't imagine, you're feeling as if you've seen an orca being dragged helplessly behind a fleet of boats. Like, that's incredible. Who would think of that other than the dream maker?
Mm-hmm. And by the way, if you want to learn how to work with your dreams, you want to invest more in this incredible tool for self-understanding. Remember that we have Dream School, where you can dive in and take these brilliant metaphors provided by the dream maker. You can take them. It's an invitation to take them more seriously. So do check that out on our website, thisjungianlife.com.
And I want to add to that what we say about Dream School is to understand your dreams better. But I think I want to change that language a bit to pick up on what you just said, Joseph. That if we said to somebody, oh my gosh, you must feel like you're being dragged around by a boat like an orca, people would kind of go, what? But when we have a dream, it is an experience. It is a lived experience of poignance and empathy and sorrow for this magnificent creature that is a part of you. But you know it experientially. And being able to relate to it that way, just as what we're talking about today about alchemically, is these are life experiences. Without that, we just have language and concepts and, it's a little dry, it's conceptual, it's valid in its own realm. But we're living a whole other life in our dreams that is encoded, like the alchemist's symbols, in special imagery that we can access by learning what these dreams mean experientially and then using them for our own growth and development of going, oh my God, that orca, yes, I get it. That was part of me. I felt it. I lived it.
Yeah, there are so many images of suffering in that dream.
And that dream school, our dream school, can give you the support to see your dreams as transformative processes. Your dreams are trying to get you to the place that you were meant to be, even that you were longing to be, that you didn't even know you were longing for. And that's just not a hyperbolic statement. That is what dreams can do. And frankly, the three of us have not found any other program that does what our dream school does. And I don't say that to brag. I just think it hasn't been done before. And an important element of that is there's a community of other students, some of which who have been working in Dream School for years, some of which are brand new, so that you have cohorts, you have other travelers on the path to help analyze your dreams. You have opportunities to offer insights about their dreams, to comment on these often very arcane concepts, which once they open, they bloom inside of you and change you. It's remarkable. It's a remarkable opportunity, and dream work is a kind of medicine that you just cannot find anywhere else.
And Deb, I think you were sort of referring to this, the very strange images that we see in alchemy. They arise from the same part of the psyche as dreams, right? So there is something very kind of dreamlike about these alchemical texts or these alchemical images. And it is so fascinating, I think, and this is one of the reasons why we wanted to do it. We wanted to go back and find a fire dream and say, okay, how is this a calcinatio? To repeat something that I said toward the beginning, it's Jung's insight about the universality of these experiences and the fact that they appear in our dreams or in our imaginations and fantasies in the same language that they have for other people who lived at totally different times and places. So we have the alchemists talking about calcination. We have them talking about the king being consumed in a great fire. And here is a modern woman struggling with something very painful. And what shows up in her dream is this image of destruction in a great fireball. So time and again, we see this incredible insight of Jung's play out that there is something universal about these images and the way we experience things. It's so moving to be reminded of the universality of these kinds of bedrock experiences of being human.
And transformation. That's the whole point of our series here, which we'll do on an occasional basis, not every single week, but it's about transformation, or what Jung called individuation. That's why it matters. And, we went off on a riff about dreams, but that's where we see these strange, powerful, at first very perplexing images. It's inside us, it's inside you, it's inside me. So alchemy and the unconscious and dreams are all fellow travelers.
Today's dreamer is a 26-year-old male who works as a marriage and family therapist intern and titles this dream, "She Chooses to Stay." I had a dream where I was visiting a real amphibious dinosaur at an aquarium. I was there because the aquarium wanted me to help find this dinosaur a mate. We would play certain sounds to attract a mate, but we weren't making progress. During this time, I'd stick my head in the water to observe her, but I now realize that was wildly dangerous. Since we weren't making any progress, I decided to go talk to her. I had to go down these stairs to this dark yet comfortable place where there was a window much deeper in her tank. Instead of appearing as a dinosaur, she appeared differently, but strangely. Her skin was snow white. She had beautiful light blue eyes, and she was completely hairless. Her personality was vibrant and friendly. I commented on how beautiful she looked, and she laughed with amusement, because she's beyond human flattery. When I asked about the mating process, she told me that all she truly desired was free will. I woke up suddenly feeling genuinely terrified because I realized that she could break out of that aquarium anytime she wanted. The only reason she hadn't is because she chose not to. For context, he writes, "Due to academic and career responsibilities, I've been unable to find the time to date, even though it weighs on my mind. I seek romantic relationships to add to my collection of self-knowledge." He says his main feelings in the dream were curiosity, enchantment, and genuine terror, and he offers a few associations. The only association I have is that the aquarium looked similar to one I used to visit as a child frequently.
Well, how much do I love this dream?
And isn't this, a perfect extension, amplification of what we were talking about earlier about the importance of dreams? Look what a dream can do. Now, is it absolutely crystal clear right from the outset? No. Is it important? Is it meaningful? Does it have a certain numinosity? Yes.
So if we start off right at the top with this dream, it's an amphibious dinosaur at an aquarium. So that right there is such a fulsome image because dinosaurs, of course, are extinct. There are these generally enormous creatures that kind of have a big archetypal jolt to them because they're essentially, kind of monsters. But here's one that is alive and it's contained in an aquarium. So this would be sort of, if this happened in real life, wow, it would be a really rare thing.
Jurassic Park.
Yeah. There you go. Jurassic Park, which the new movie is out, and am I gonna go? I always go to this. But so it's really highly unusual. It's something from an ancient time. So you could even think about it sort of like phylogenetically. The dinosaur part of us is very, very old, and we still have that part of us in our kind of limbic system in the brain, our emotional system. So this is really ancient, important, valuable, and contained in this, an aquarium, a place that you take little kids, for entertainment.
And amphibians live in two realms. They live in the water and they live on land. And building on what you said about really, really old, Jung talked about the 3 million year old man in each of us, that our phylogenetic memory, if I can call it that, goes way, way back. So here we are with this incredible initial image of the amphibious dinosaur who is contained. The dinosaur wants a mate.
No, actually, she doesn't. The dream ego thinks she needs a mate.
Oh, the aquarium wants the dream ego. So we have an organization, the aquarium, meaning the administration of this aquarium, wants the dream ego to help the dinosaur find a mate. And they weren't making any progress despite playing certain sounds that were purportedly to attract a mate. So he'd stick his head in the water, then realizes that's dangerous. And then, as I don't know how many mythological examples tell us, our dream ego has to make a descent.
Before we get to the descent, though, let's talk about this image of him sticking his head in the water. On the one hand, I think it shows a desire on the part of the dreamer to have an encounter with something in the unconscious. But it's also a little hubristic. It's like, I'm going to go into her world. And as the dream ego realizes, that could be very dangerous. So what I might wonder about, for example, is, someone who's like, I want to have a groovy experience of the unconscious and I'm going to do a lot of acid. Well, you're going to have an experience with the unconscious. And for some people, that could be too much. Like, that can be dangerous.
I can vouch for that.
So you don't want to do it just for fun. You don't want to do it casually. So he's being a little bit too casual. And then I think he gets to the point where you were going, Deb, where he realizes he has to make a kind of intentional descent that honors that she lives in her own realm. I mean, you don't want the archetypes coming alive and joining you at your desk, because that's psychosis. You want that big, strong plexiglass wall, or whatever it is, those aquarium walls, between you and the archetype. You want to honor the power of the archetype by making sure that there is, that you recognize that you don't belong in that world. You don't belong in that world.
There's separation, the observing ego, once again.
But I find myself leaning into, and boy, I wish this person was here. When I asked her about the mating process, she told me that all she truly desired was free will. Boy, that term free will can mean so many different things
Yeah.
to so many different people. But that's the revelation. Like, that's the oracular moment of the dream, is that there is,
That's the new discovery.
yes, there's a misinterpretation about what is needed. And then the thing, which is just what we're talking about, the instinct reveals its own fantasy, its own desire, which is languaged in the dream as free will. Like I said, that's a very complicated process and phrase. So it's difficult to know, but clearly he's a marital and family therapist intern. The psyche is thinking, you need a mate. It's all about the mate. Find a mate. If they just got a mate, got married, then we could do therapy with the two of them and make it all really work. Dinosaur therapy is the thing. But something inside says, it's not all about the marriage. It's not all about the mating. That there's this other thing called free will that is more desired. And perhaps that would be quite a new concept, which he finds terrifying, but a new concept that might be relevant to his development as a marriage and family therapist, which is, where is free will in the system of doing couples counseling and family therapy?
I want to, while we're in that place, just lift up a few things. First of all, clearly, this is a wallop of an anima image. So she is a dinosaur, but she's so clearly female, and her skin is snow white, and she has beautiful light blue eyes, and she's hairless. I mean,
And don't forget vibrant and friendly.
yes. So not a human anima, but I think that's definitely the realm that we're in. It reminds me a little bit about that film, The Shape of Water.
I was thinking about that.
Yes. Which we did a podcast on way, way back. But in any case, Joseph, I think what you're saying is really important. This is the revelation. This is the kind of new information. And then, of course, he feels really terrified because he realizes she's much more powerful than she cannot be contained. And that is true. The anima can't be contained. The anima is not there for your enjoyment and entertainment.
It's not a pet.
It's not a pet. A dinosaur is not a good pet. And one of the things that came up for me with this dream, and so I talked a little bit about the hubris of putting his head in the water. There's another place where I think hubris shows up in this dream text, and that's in the associations. He says, I seek romantic relationships to add to my collection of self-knowledge. Well, a romantic relationship will certainly teach you more about yourself. But if you're going in because you want to learn more about yourself,
Looking for specimens.
yes. So you that is a hubristic attitude. Really, what's going to happen when you fall in love is you're going to get the psychic shit get kicked out of you. That's what happens when you fall in love. Is it isn't about, oh, this is very interesting and I'll learn a lot from it. You submit to a force greater than yourself. And I think that's where this dream is going. I think that's the medicine in the dream, is for the dreamer, both, as you said, Joseph, to realize it's not about, the mate, it's about free will, but also you are in the presence of something larger than you, and you have to kind of drop this really egoic attitude that you're going to be in control of it. You're going to set the agenda. You're going to be able to contain it.
Not. It's right there in the dream of exactly mirrors this, that the aquarium wants our dream ego to find the dinosaur mate. That is the diktat coming forth from the powers that be. That's the solution. This is what we're after. But then when he actually encounters this wonderful dinosaur, she says, oh, I don't want a mate. I just want free will. I want to be myself. I want to express myself. And that is the anima and animus. And it's also what Jung said over and over again about the unconscious. It has its own direction. It has its own energy. It has its own agency. And so kind of be careful what you wish for. In thinking that your romantic, I'm repeating or reiterating what you've said, that a romantic relationship is something you can have. Versus it will have its own energy. It will have its own direction. It will have plenty of intense feeling. So the caution here is the old RESPECT that we got from Aretha Franklin.
So I do want to say I think this dream it's a little poke. It's a bit of a corrective. But I also, and this is a young man, and it also signifies to me that he has quite an ability to have a relationship with the unconscious.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine that he will make a very fine therapist.
Yes, this is a gift of a dream. This is a real gift that the dream maker has said, you're worthy of this kind of a wondrous dream. And a relationship, maybe not the way you're currently conceiving of it, but a relationship with this wonderful, vibrant, friendly power in the unconscious.
It's also, I hope, reinforcing the idea that if you're doing marital therapy, learning what Jung had to say about the anima and animus is central to understanding couple dynamics. And if that's a new concept, there's a very accessible book called Invisible Partners. I can't remember the author at the moment, but if you type that into the search, it'll come forward, which is a great introduction to the way that our inner representations of the romantic other influence our outer relationships. The idea that this powerful archetypal force could break out of the aquarium and then go about its independent business is frightening. Gives us an important sense of where the work lay relative to also becoming a couples counselor. Is that boxing the couple into a prescribed idea about what coupling should look like or what the family should look like can be quite difficult. And we find, as Virginia Satir did with her family therapy work, is that every family has its own unique structure and dynamic, and it can't be put into an aquarium. It can't be put into a single frame, although we have to learn about this initially in a structured way. But you're right. Who you are as a marital and family therapist and the families themselves will have to break out of the aquarium to reveal their true and full nature. And as an intern, I remember being a social work intern, that's a scary proposition, that it's not going to line up with all of the tidy theories that we learn in school.
And that's the good news. Really, that's the good news.
It makes it much more interesting, right?
Exactly.
Much more fascinating and unpredictable.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. To submit a dream, suggest an episode topic, or join our mailing list, visit our website, thisjungianlife.com. If you enjoyed this episode, give us 5 stars and a good review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure to click the notification bell to be alerted whenever we upload videos. And keep up with all things TJL by following us on Instagram, Facebook, X, and TikTok.